Have you ever noticed that some people get lonelier the older they get? Not because they're unkind or unlovable, but because something just seems off? Maybe it's the way they talk, or how they always bring the mood down. And the strange part is, they usually have no idea why people start pulling away. Aging is a journey we all walk. There's wisdom, freedom, and so many beautiful moments. But let's be honest, there are also challenges. Not just the aching knees or the medications lined up on the counter, but the emotional and social changes. People change around us. Sometimes they call less, visit less. Sometimes we catch ourselves wondering, did I do something wrong? And the truth is, maybe. Not out of malice. Not because we meant to, but because certain habits sneak in as we grow older. Habits that push people away without us realizing. They start small, like a pebble in your shoe. But left unchecked, they can wear down even the strongest are. That's what we're talking about today. Not to criticize, not to shame, but to reflect with kindness. Because the good news is, any habit can be changed. And just a few small shifts in how we relate to others can breathe new life into our relationships. Let's take a moment together and talk through some of these sneaky little habits that show up in old age. Habits that can quietly make people avoid us. And more importantly, how to gently let go of them so we can draw others closer again. Let's start with the first one, complaining. Yes, life gets harder. The body doesn't move the way it used to. Prices keep climbing. The news is full of chaos. And when we've lived through decades of ups and downs, it's natural to have a lot to say about what's wrong. But here's the thing, when every conversation turns into a list of complaints, it starts to feel heavy. Not just for us, but for the people around us. Think about it. If every time you call your friend Helen, she sighs and launches into how her back hurts, how her neighbor's trash bins are always in the way, how the world's going to hell, well, it doesn't take long before you start hitting decline on her call. Not because you don't care, but because it's exhausting. Now imagine you are Helen. Without realizing it, you've become someone people avoid, not because they don't love you, but because they don't have the energy to carry all your weight and their own. This doesn't mean you need to fake being cheerful all the time. It's okay to vent. It's human. But if you can also sprinkle in a little joy, maybe something funny you saw online, or a kind word someone gave you, it changes the energy of the entire conversation. It says, yes, life is hard, but I'm still here, and there's still good. That's the kind of energy people want to be around. Not perfection, not denial, just hope, just balance. And speaking of balance, let's talk about another habit that tends to show up when we get older, constantly talking about our health. Now listen, if there's one thing we seniors have earned, it's the right to talk about our aches, our pains, our doctor visits. We've got the pill organizers, the hearing aids, the knee replacements to prove it, and it's perfectly normal to mention these things. But when every visit with the grandkids turns into a rundown of your blood pressure, your latest MRI, and the exact dosage of each medication, well, you start to lose them. Not because they don't care, but because it starts to feel like they're not visiting you, they're visiting your medical chart. People, especially the ones we love, want to feel connected to more than just our symptoms. They want to know what we've been reading, what we think of that new movie, whether we tried that TikTok dance everyone's talking about, even if we failed miserably. There's a story I always remember. A woman named Dorothy, in her early 80s, used to have her granddaughter over every weekend. They baked cookies, watched cartoons, talked about school. But over time, as Dorothy's health declined, every conversation became a medical update. Her medications, her digestion, her arthritis. The visits became shorter. Then they stopped, except for holidays. And Dorothy couldn't understand why. It wasn't because her granddaughter stopped loving her. It was because the relationship had become one-sided, centered on pain instead of connection. You are more than your prescriptions. Your voice still matters. Your opinions still matter. Even if your body is slowing down, your spirit is still vibrant. And that's what people want to see. Now let's move into something a bit trickier. One of the most common habits that push people away, especially our own children and grandchildren, is being too opinionated. And let's be clear, you do have the right to your opinion. You've lived through wars, through presidential scandals, through heartbreak and redemption. You've raised children, paid bills, survived recessions. You've earned your wisdom. But sometimes that wisdom turns into rigidity, into my way or the highway, into correcting, judging, even criticizing without meaning to. Take Robert, for example. He's 74, a proud father of 3, and a retired high school teacher. He's a smart man, well-read, well-meaning, but every time his daughter Sarah visited, he'd correct her parenting style. You shouldn't let him use the iPad so much. Back in my day, kids got spanked and turned out just fine. That's not how you talk to a child. He thought he was helping. He really did. But Sarah didn't hear love in his voice. She heard judgment. And over time, she started calling less, visiting less. Not because she didn't respect him, but because being around him made her feel small. And here's the thing, no one wants to feel small. Especially not around their own parents or grandparents. Sometimes, being right isn't as important as being kind. Sometimes, keeping a relationship strong means letting a comment slide. Saying, I see where you're coming from, even when you disagree. It doesn't mean you stop being you. It means you leave room for others to be themselves too. And that space, that grace, is what keeps people close. So if you've ever felt like the phone doesn't ring as much, or the house is too quiet these days, maybe, just maybe, it's not them pulling away. Maybe it's time to gently reflect and ask, have I been doing more talking than listening? More correcting than encouraging? More complaining than connecting? The beauty of aging is that it gives us the chance to grow in ways we never had time to before. To slow down, yes, but also to open up, to soften, to relearn how to love and be loved, not just as a parent or a partner, but as a person. Because the truth is, the people who stay in our lives long term, they're not staying because we're perfect. They're staying because they feel seen, heard, valued. And we have the power to create that feeling, no matter how many candles are on the cake. Let's keep going. Because if you're still here, it means you care. It means you want your relationships to grow stronger, not weaker. And that right there, that openness, is the key to staying connected as we age. So let's talk about something that's not always easy to admit: letting ourselves go. I know, it's not a pretty topic, but it's real. And it affects how people respond to us, whether we like it or not. As we get older, energy fades. Some days it's harder to get out of bed, let alone iron a shirt or wash the dishes. And sometimes, honestly, we just stop caring. We tell ourselves, why bother? Who's going to see me? But here's the truth, no one says out loud. Personal hygiene isn't about vanity. It's about dignity. It's about telling yourself and the people around you, I still matter. I still care. I once heard a caregiver named Emily talk about her dad, Frank. He used to wear cologne every day, kept his shirts neatly pressed. But after his wife passed, that all changed. He stopped brushing his teeth, wore the same old sweater for a week straight, and let dishes pile up in the sink. It wasn't just hard for Emily to watch, it was hard for her to be there. The smell, the mess, the sadness of seeing someone who once took pride in himself, now fading into the background. She didn't say it out loud, but she started visiting less. That's the part that stings. People might not tell you what's wrong, they'll just stop coming. But it doesn't have to be this way. You don't have to dress like you're going to a wedding. Just clean clothes, a brushed head of hair, a dab of lotion, fresh breath. It's not about impressing others. It's about honoring yourself. And when you do that, people feel it. They see the spark in your eyes and they're drawn to it. Not because you're perfect, but because you're still present. Now let's turn to something a little more subtle. Living in the past. Oh, the stories we have. First jobs, first loves, wild nights, and hard lessons. There's nothing wrong with reminiscing. In fact, it's beautiful. It's how we pass on wisdom, culture, family history. But when every conversation starts with, "back in my day," or "things were better when," it sends a quiet message. The present isn't worth your attention. And here's what happens. Your kids want to tell you about their new job, but you shift the conversation to what your boss was like in 1973. Your grandkids want to show you a funny video, but you talk about that time you saw Elvis in concert. Eventually, they stop trying to share. Not because they don't care, but because they don't feel heard. There's one woman I know, Eleanor, who made a big change. She loved telling stories about her youth, and her grandkids loved them too, at first. But one day her granddaughter said, "Grandma, do you even want to know about my life?" It broke Eleanor's heart, but it woke her up. So instead of launching into another memory, she started asking questions. What's your favorite class? Who's that friend you always talk about? What's that song stuck in your head? And you know what happened? The stories came back, this time from both sides. Now they swap tales like old friends. Because Eleanor made room for today, not just yesterday. And speaking of younger people, let's talk about them. Or rather, let's talk about how we talk about them. We've all said it at some point. Kids these days, maybe it's their music, their slang, the way they dress or text instead of call. It's easy to shake our heads and say, what happened to good manners? But here's a question. How did it feel when your parents said that about you? Because they did. Every generation complains about the next. It's tradition, almost. But if all our kids and grandkids hear from us is criticism, why would they keep coming around? No one wants to be around someone who always disapproves of them. It doesn't matter if you're 15 or 50. Now, that doesn't mean you have to understand everything they do. But try this. Instead of pointing out what's wrong, look for what's right. Tell your grandson he's creative. Tell your granddaughter she's smart and strong. Ask them what they love. You don't have to get TikTok. You just have to care. That kind of bridge building creates a bond that goes beyond age. Suddenly you're not out of touch. You're someone who listens. Someone who respects. And respect is the foundation of every strong relationship. Now let's touch on another habit that's incredibly common in older age, especially in tight-knit communities: gossip and meddling. It starts small. A comment here, a question there. Did you hear what Susan said to her daughter? I don't know why they let him move back home at 35. It might feel like harmless conversation. But gossip chips away at trust. And meddling, offering opinions or advice that no one asked for, can make people put up walls. There's a man I knew named Walter. He meant well, truly. But he couldn't stop inserting himself into his son's marriage. Every phone call turned into a critique of how they spent money, how they raised their kids. Eventually, his son stopped answering. Walter didn't understand. He thought, but I'm just trying to help. Here's the hard truth. Helping only works when it's wanted. The next time you feel tempted to chime in on someone's choices, pause. Ask yourself, did they ask for my opinion? If not, consider staying silent. Not because you don't care, but because your silence can sometimes speak louder in love than your words ever could. And finally, for now, let's talk about learning, or more accurately, refusing to learn. Technology is a beast, I know. 1 minute you're flipping through a newspaper, and the next your doctor's asking you to use a QR code to check in. It's overwhelming, frustrating. But shutting it all out? Saying, I'm too old for this? That's like locking yourself in a room and throwing away the key. Because this world isn't slowing down. And the more we resist it, the more isolated we become. But here's the good news. You don't have to become a tech wizard overnight. You just have to try. There was a woman, Ruth, in her late 80s, who decided to take a basic computer class at the library. She was scared. She said her hands shook every time she touched the keyboard. But she stuck with it. And now, she plays online chess with her nephew in Arizona every Saturday morning. It makes me feel young again, she said. Learning something new, whether it's how to use email, send a voice message, or even just scroll through pictures on your phone, opens doors. It says to your loved ones, I still want to be part of your world. And that kind of willingness, that kind of effort, it brings people closer than you might imagine. So if you're holding on to the old ways, gripping them tight because they're familiar, maybe try loosening your grip just a little. Take a small step forward. You might just find that the people you love are standing there, waiting to take that step with you. Now, we've already touched on some powerful truths, and if any of them stirred something inside you, a memory, a twinge of recognition, maybe even a bit of discomfort, that's okay. That means you're paying attention. That means you care. And that's more than enough to begin. Let's talk about something we don't like to admit out loud: playing the victim. Look, loneliness is real. It's one of the hardest things about getting older. Friends move away. Some pass on. Our routines change. People get busy. It's easy to start thinking, why doesn't anyone call me? Why do I always have to be the one reaching out? Doesn't anyone care? But when those thoughts become the story we tell ourselves over and over, we fall into a quiet trap. We begin to believe that the world has left us behind, that no one sees us, that no one cares. And here's the difficult part. When you carry that story into your conversations, into your energy, into your posture, people can feel it. And over time, they don't know how to help. So they step back. Not out of cruelty, but out of confusion or guilt. Dorothy, a widow in her late 70s, used to say things like, well, I guess no one wants to spend time with an old lady like me. Or, I know I'm just a burden now. At first, her daughter tried reassuring her. Then she tried visiting more. But eventually she just didn't know what else to say. What Dorothy didn't realize is that those statements made her loved ones feel helpless. And that helplessness slowly pushed them away. If you've ever felt invisible, here's something to try. Flip the story. Instead of waiting for the phone to ring, make the call. Instead of saying, nobody visits me, say, I'd love to have you over. How about Tuesday? Send a card. Share a joke. Invite a neighbor for tea. You'd be surprised how a small act of outreach can crack open a much bigger connection. You are not a burden. You are a gift. But people need to be reminded of your light. And the best way to do that is to shine. Now let's move to a habit that's a little less emotional, but no less damaging: being financially controlling. Money, for many of us, is tied to love. We work hard to build something, and when we have a little extra, we want to help our kids and grandkids. That's beautiful. That's generous. But here's where it gets complicated. When generosity becomes a leash. When giving money turns into a form of emotional control. Walter, a retired mechanic, helped his adult son buy a house. But every time they had a disagreement, Walter would bring it up. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't even have that roof over your head. His son eventually stopped coming around. Not because he was ungrateful, but because he felt trapped. Every dollar Walter gave came with an invisible contract. I helped you, so now you owe me. That's not love. That's obligation. And obligation builds walls where love should live. If you choose to give, give freely. Give because you want to, not because you expect anything in return. And if you can't give without keeping score, it's okay to say no. Because relationships built on conditions don't last. But relationships built on trust, on mutual respect, those are unshakable. Now let's turn inward for a moment. Let's talk about a habit that's more about pride than anything else: refusing help. We've spent a lifetime being strong, being the ones who fix, support, provide. So when the time comes that we need help, whether it's carrying groceries or getting to a doctor's appointment, it feels uncomfortable, like weakness. But here's the thing: accepting help isn't weakness. It's connection. It's grace. There's a woman named Margaret who lives down the street from me. Fiercely independent. Still drives. Still mows her own lawn at 78. But when her neighbor offered to bring over dinner after she had surgery, she smiled and said, "Thanks, but I can manage." The truth? She was exhausted, in pain, and lonely. But her pride built a wall where a bridge could have been. People want to feel useful. They want to help. When you say yes to help, you're not taking, you're giving. You're giving someone a chance to love you in action. So next time your granddaughter says, "Let me carry that," let her. Next time your neighbor offers a ride, say yes. Not because you need it, but because it's a way to say, "We're in this life together." That togetherness, that shared humanity, is what keeps us connected, especially in our later years. And you know what makes that connection even stronger? A sense of humor. Life is heavy sometimes. The aches and pains are real. The grief, the change, the uncertainty, it piles up. But laughter? Laughter is a life raft. It doesn't mean we ignore the hard stuff. It means we keep our hearts open through it. There's a woman named Ruth who used to say, "I may be wrinkled, but I'm still spicy." She'd wink, crack a joke, and light up the whole room. People loved being around her. Not because her life was easy, it wasn't, but because she made it easier to breathe. A sense of humor says, "I haven't given up." It invites people in. It softens tension. It reminds everyone, including yourself, that even now, you still have joy to give. So laugh. Laugh at yourself. Laugh with others. Find humor in the absurd. Because when you do, you don't just brighten the room. You make people want to be in it. And finally, let's talk about one of the trickiest habits of all: giving unsolicited advice. We mean well. Of course we do. We see someone struggling, and our instinct is to offer solutions. "You should do this. Back when I had that problem, here's what worked. Have you tried?" But often people aren't looking for advice. They're looking for understanding. For someone to simply say, "That must be hard," and mean it. Bob, a retired school principal, once said, "I thought I was helping. I gave my daughter tips on budgeting, on raising her kids, on her marriage. I didn't realize she felt judged, like I was saying she couldn't figure it out on her own." That realization hurt. But it also changed him. Now, when his daughter vents about a rough day, he listens. He nods. He says, "I'm proud of how you're handling that." And if she asks for advice, he offers it, gently, and only what's needed. That shift brought them closer than they'd ever been. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can say is nothing at all. Just be present. Be safe. Be someone who listens without trying to fix. Because presence heals more than advice ever will. So, maybe some of these habits felt familiar. Maybe a few of them made you wince. That's okay. That's human. What matters now isn't what you did yesterday. It's what you choose today. You don't need to change overnight. You don't even need to change everything. Just choose one thing. One habit to soften. One conversation to approach differently. One chance to say, "Tell me more," instead of, "Here's what you should do." Because here's the truth. Growing old is a gift. But growing old with grace, with warmth, humility, and curiosity, that's a legacy. And you deserve to be remembered not for your wisdom alone, but for how you made others feel. So go easy on yourself. Go gently. Reflect, breathe, and begin again. And if this message spoke to your heart, I hope you'll share it. Leave a comment. What habit are you working on? What did you recognize in yourself? And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Strong Elderly Life for more stories, insights, and encouragement, because we're walking this path with you, every step of the way. Here's to living your fullest life, no matter your age. And remember, you are not invisible. You are not a burden. You are still becoming. Stay kind. Stay humble. Stay golden.